We all know that certain alternative practices operating in Europe and America from the 1960s onwards were not solely concerned with an activism that addressed world politics, and by alternative I mean practices that were not necessarily part of the mainstream. There were issues that were related specifically to artistic production that they also sought to challenge. We know that conceptual art of the period sought to challenge an institutional orthodoxy relating to a particular notion of modernism and its associated values such as technical expertise, authenticity, permanence and uniqueness within artistic production. This orthodoxy, so okay, it's kind of echoing. Is it okay for you? Oh, it's just echoing for me. This orthodoxy inevitably privileged certain types of work and, in turn, certain types of artists. Conceptual artists in particular responded to these aesthetic values by promoting practices that emphasised anti-elitism, ephemerality, reproduction and collaboration, for instance. Photocopies, pamphlets, postcards, newspapers, etc. became the vehicles of choice. We also know that such practices were designed at least to forestall a perceived voracious commercialisation of contemporary art. In 1976, in her essay Cheap Art Utopia, the artist Adrian Piper wrote of the transformative power of the artist's publication and its potential to revolutionise the workings of the art world. Piper wrote, "It will be easier for more artists to publicise their work without going through the political process of selection now required, i.e. whether you've gotten written up, by whom and where, who you've slept with, where you hang out with, etc. So new aesthetic standards would have to evolve in order to discriminate mediocre work from first-rate work, rather than the standard of simply having been sifted through this process itself. Also, people would actually have to develop these standards themselves instead of leaving all the hard work to the critics, since there would not be enough famous critics to pass judgment on all the work." Piper's words set the tone of the time. Anything seemed possible, and artists saw themselves at the centre of change. However, in her survey of American conceptual art, 6 years of dematerialisation of the art object, Lucy Lippard highlights that before the end of the 1970s, such conceptual art practices had been absorbed within the market and were selling well. Lippard conceded that whatever minor revolutions in communication had been achieved by the process of dematerialising the object, art and artists in a capitalist society remain luxuries. Yet despite this apparent failure, 30 years on, many of the objectives of conceptual artists, at least superficially, seem to have been met. In general, access to contemporary art has never been easier, and contemporary art in Britain enjoys greater visibility than ever before. Democratic methods of art production and dissemination are now commonplace, including the use of cheap materials and mass production. Artists like me, who have often looked back to the radical strategies of conceptual art for some way forward, should be happy, but instead I'm troubled. Surely conceptual art was not proposing a populist art. A popularisation of contemporary art in Britain has occurred over the past 20 years and has changed the way in which we will engage with it forever. This popularisation is not the result of an artist-led revolution, but of the increasing influence of private and corporate sponsorship on the programming, funding and experiencing of the arts in Britain since the Thatcher era. In privatising culture, corporate art intervention since the 1980s, Chintao Wu charted the problematics of this phenomenon, particularly concerning the power that Wu concentrates primarily on the impact of private and corporate investment on systemic and institutional levels. As a practicing artist, I am concerned with how this phenomenon impacts on art practice and whether it is something which practitioners can negotiate a critical relation. What concerns me is how during this process of popularisation, major cultural institutions have adopted many strategies from conceptual art that they now utilise as powerful marketing tools. I want to briefly look at some of the ways in that contemporary art has been popularised via its relationship with corporate sponsorship over the past 2 decades. Firstly, Artangel, the publicly funded commissioning agency, have been instrumental in facilitating the popularisation of contemporary art in Britain over the past decade. Consider, for example, ambitious commissions such as Jeremy Deller's Battle for Albury, 2001, the reenactment of the historic confrontation between the police and miners during the miners' strike of 1984. Such public works received significant television coverage. The screening of director Mike Fickus's film of Deller's reenactment that appeared on national television via Channel 4, for example. Artangel ensures high-profile coverage of many of its projects by co-commissioning works with powerful press and media companies. For instance, Channel 4's co-commissioned Deller's project. Equally, Artangel's ongoing collaboration with the Times newspaper also ensures quality press coverage. Contemporary art and art education have not escaped the realms of reality TV. In programmes like last year's Art School, here celebrities including journalist John Humphreys, presenter Ulrika Johnson, chef Clarissa Dixon-Wright and actor Keith Allen, all of whom had little experience of art making, were put through their paces in an extensive 2-week course at Chelsea College of Art and Design. The series was broadcast on BBC Two. Head of College, Professor Roger Wilson, enthused, "We hope that the resulting programme will be informative as well as entertaining viewing, helping us raise the profile of arts education and encouraging more people to engage with art and design. It will be interesting to see whether student applications at Chelsea have risen as a result of this series." In recent years, influential department stores like Habitat and Selfridges have formed allegiances with major galleries and their contemporary artists, to the extent that such art has been criticised for becoming synonymous with the marketing of lifestyle. In the last 5 years, Selfridges has commissioned a series of high-profile public works around its London store by international artists including Samuel Fosso, Barbara Kruger, David LaChapelle and Sam Taylor Wood. Equally, Habitat's online art on demand site allows you to choose from a selection of prints including work by Jean-Michel Basquiat, Gary Hume, Mark Quinn and Joe Self. According to Habitat, as a customer you may create a piece of high-quality artwork specific to your individual wishes delivered direct to your door. Basically, you can choose what surface, mounting and size you want your print to be from a selection of tick boxes on screen.